welcome to today's Explainer. I am honestly so incredibly excited to take you through this one. Today we're looking at a story that reads way less like standard corporate history, and honestly a whole lot more like a thrilling heist of corporate engineering. We are tracing the unbelievable 80-year evolution of Pontiac. We're tracking this epic journey, from conservative companion to corporate rebel. This is the story of a brand that literally went from making your grandfather's predictable Sunday cruiser to architecting an era of pure, tire-smoking adrenaline. Okay, let's dive right into this. How did a boring, conservative family car brand break all the rules to invent the American muscle car? I mean, it's a massive contradiction, right? Usually automotive brands pick a lane and they just stay in it. You know, you're either the sensible choice or you're the wild choice. But Pontiac? They started as the absolute pinnacle of predictability before just abruptly tearing up their own playbook to become the definitive excitement division of General Motors. And today, we're going to unpack exactly how that dramatic transformation went down.
Well, you can't really have a rebellion without rebels. So I want to introduce you to the three masterminds who orchestrated this massive shift. We've got Seaman Bunky Knudsen, engineer Pete Estes, and the legendary John DeLorean. Now, these guys weren't just your standard executives. They were visionary engineers who actively defied General Motors' strict internal rules to completely alter the course of American automotive history. Keep these three names in mind as we go, because they are the driving force behind the whole shebang. Let's move ahead and take a quick look at how this builds across the 20th century. We're covering four major eras in today's Explainer. We'll start in 1926 with Pontiac's humble origins, then jump to the explosive muscle boom of 1964. From there, we shift into the futuristic excitement era of the 1980s before finally looking at the tragic sequence of events that brought the brand to an end in 2010. All right, kicking things off with Section 1, the conservative companion, let's go back to the 20s. So in 1926, General Motors introduced Pontiac. But here's the thing. It wasn't launched as some standalone powerhouse. It was actually just a companion brand to Oakland. The strategy was super simple. They just needed to bridge a pricing gap. GM wanted something a little nicer than an entry-level Chevy, but, more affordable than an upscale Oldsmobile. But here is the crazy part. Pontiac, this humble little companion brand, proved to be so incredibly popular with consumers that it completely outsold its parent. By 1931, Pontiac actually replaced Oakland entirely. It was a huge success, but it's really important to note that it was a success built on being incredibly sensible. And that sensible nature really cemented itself during what's known as the Silver Streak era, which ran from 1935 to 1954. Visually, if you saw Pontiac, you knew it by these distinctive parallel chrome bands running right down the center of the hood and the grille. And their reputation? Well, they were highly reliable, very comfortable, and strictly conservative family cars. Literally, for nearly 2 decades, if you bought a Pontiac, you were buying a safe, staid, entirely predictable ride. And honestly, this deep-rooted conservatism is exactly what makes their impending rebellion so incredibly shocking. Which brings us to Section 2, the performance pivot. Things are about to get really interesting. So between 1956 and 1963, Bunky Knudsen and Pete Estes took the reins, and they brought a major technical innovation with them. The legendary Trophy V8 engine. They realized that to shake off that boring image, they needed serious, raw power and heavy-duty engineering. So they dropped this phenomenal high-displacement V8, complete with rugged racing components, into their cars and took them straight to the racetrack. Almost overnight, Pontiac started finding massive, undeniable success in NASCAR. Paired with the debut of the sleek, high-performance Bonneville, Knudsen and Estes just violently shifted Pontiac's trajectory from Sunday driver to absolute track dominator. Now, to signal this aggressive new direction, they obviously needed a new look, which brings up a really fun fact about the brand's visual identity. For some context, the brand was originally named after the city of Pontiac, Michigan, which itself was named after Chief Pontiac, an 18th century leader of the Odawa tribe. For decades, the logo was a Native American profile silhouette. But in 1959, perfectly timing it with their performance pivot, they swapped it out for the modern, downward-pointing red dart or arrowhead design. That sharp, forward-leaning arrow, it was the perfect symbol for their new momentum. All right, turning the heat up for Section 3, inventing the muscle car. This is the climax of our story. Now, what's absolutely fascinating here is how blatantly John DeLorean's team defied General Motors' own internal corporate rules. See, the GM rules of the era strictly dictated that mid-sized cars were meant to be economical. If you wanted a massive V8 engine, well, you had to buy a massive full-size luxury liner. But DeLorean and his engineering team, they completely ignored the top brass. Actually, scratch that. They didn't just ignore the rules, they tore them up. They took the intermediate-sized Pontiac Tempest body and managed to cram a massive 389 cubic inch V8 engine right into it. It was a staggering piece of rogue engineering that birthed an absolute beast. And they called this rogue engineering package the GTO, which stands for Gran Turismo Omologato. But this wasn't just a fast car. It became an overnight cultural phenomenon. By forcing that massive engine into a lighter, mid-sized frame, they basically created an accessible, street-legal rocket ship. It had 0 to 60 times that absolutely terrified the competition. And the public? They went totally crazy for it. The success of the GTO was just so explosive that it sent shockwaves through the entire industry. I mean, suddenly, every major American automaker was rushing to get their own muscle cars to market. So the crucial takeaway for us is that Pontiac didn't just design a popular vehicle. Through sheer technical defiance, they architected an entire generation of American automotive culture. Think about the golden era of the muscle car, the fierce rivalries, the horsepower wars. All of it traces right back to Pontiac breaking the rules.
Moving right along to Section 4, Pop Culture Icons. Now, as we get into the 70s and 80s, emissions regulations and fuel crises really began to choke engine horsepower across the board. But this brilliantly illustrates how Pontiac maintained its edge. They did it through sheer pop culture gravity. In 1977, the second-generation Firebird Trans Am, complete with that massive, iconic Screaming Chicken Hood decal, starred alongside Burt Reynolds in the smash hit Smokey and the Bandit. It became an instant legend. Then in the 80s, leaning into their famous "We Build Excitement" slogan, the third-gen Firebird gained global fame as the talking supercar KITT in Knight Rider. And they were still pushing technical boundaries too, releasing the Fiero, America's first mass-produced mid-engine sports car. They used striking, futuristic, plastic-cladded designs to ensure that even when the engines had to get smaller, the brand's excitement stayed larger than life. Which sadly brings us to Section 5, the final chapter. Let's slow things down a bit to look at how it all ended. Let's walk through the sequence of events that ultimately brought the excitement division to a close. During the 1990s, Pontiac really suffered heavily from corporate part sharing. They lost a lot of their unique, rebellious identity just blending in with the rest of GM's massive fleet. But from 2004 onward, they made one last, really valiant attempt at an enthusiast revival. They imported a rear-wheel drive GTO from Holden in Australia and released the highly praised G8 sedan. They were genuinely getting back to their pure performance roots. But, tragically, it was just too late. The devastating 2009 General Motors bankruptcy forced a massive corporate restructuring, and ultimately, the Pontiac brand was officially discontinued in 2010. Which leaves us with this final thought to chew on. A brand that started out as a cautious, conservative companion ended up leaving one of the most thrilling, adrenaline-fueled legacies in automotive history. If Pontiac's engineers had never broken GM's rules, if they hadn't forced that massive V8 into a mid-sized car, would the American muscle car even exist today? It's a fascinating question about the power of defying the status quo, and I really hope it leaves you wanting to learn even more about the rebels who built the cars we love. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll see you next time.